KWT slaying.
This is another teaching by Teo Ministries. The title of this teaching is Haplogroup is a Guessing Game. So we're going to look at some references that indicate that the science of haplogroup is not definitive, meaning there are opinions about how to interpret the data based on who's looking at it, based on one scientist's opinion versus another scientist's opinion. This is the way it is because you have to understand too that the teaching of haplogroup is a Darwinian concept. Put it this way, they approach it from a Darwinian perspective, meaning everything is tens of thousands of years old, 26,000 years old, 50,000 years old, 60,000 years ago. And if you believe the Bible like we do, first of all, a lot of that is moot. It's not valid if you believe the Bible. Okay, now a lot of Hebrew Israelites are part of the religion of E. That's what my brother and I call it. We sort of laugh at it. The religion of E. What is the religion of E? The religion of E1B1A. And then when you point out that some white people have E1B1A, they say, well, he must be a Hebrew. Right? And then you see that E1B1B is a minor mutation from A. Right? So you have E1B1, E1B1A, E1B1B, minor mutation from A. Minor. So they got the same forefather. So some people say, well, oh, that's Jacob and Esau. But remember, the teachings by the scientists themselves indicate that these people with these mutations existed before the nation of Israel ever existed, according to their science. Thousands, tens of thousands of years ago, before Abraham. Okay, it's a Darwinian teaching, a Darwinian concept. But let's see what we can find. Let's look at the language of the scientists and let's see what they actually have to say. So here we have an article in the Scientific American from 2010. The title is Genetic Ancestry Testing is an Inexact Science, Task Force says. As store-based distribution of genetic health tests remains stalled pending federal review, genetic ancestry tests are also drawing widespread concern from experts. A task force report commissioned by the American Society for Human Genetics and led by Chairman Royal of the Institute for Genomic Sciences and Policy at Duke University has called for better research and reporting in both academic and public genetic ancestry tests. Some 40 companies currently offer personal genetic ancestry tests, but results and interpretations are troublingly variable. the task force found the very concept of ancestry is subject to misunderstanding in both the general and scientific communities, the task force members wrote. Scientists who research population histories have trouble sorting out definitive answers about geographic origins and ancient migrations, and I'm going to show you some of those examples later. And they generally work with larger, more statistically weighty samples rather than with data from a single individual. Although databases of reference genetic sequences are growing rapidly, many of the major studies have been done from the Human Genetic Diversity Panel, with only about 1,100 genetic samples from across the globe, which means that even much of the vetted academic work on human ancestry is still far from conclusive. So it's a guessing game. It's not conclusive. They have not reached a definitive decision. For most individuals, genetic ancestry tests hold the promise of pinpointing where their ancestors came from. Unfortunately, science has not yet caught up to this expected and sometimes promised level of precision. The estimates of geographic ancestral origins are based on basal ancestral populations from, for instance, Northern Europe, Asia, Africa, or North America. However, as the task force report authors pointed out, most of these genetic population maps are actually based on best estimates of original populations because we do not have the ability to sample ancestral populations. Do you see? They cannot even verify because they can't test the ancient DNA. This is a lie. This science is not valid. Haplogroup stuff is not valid. Instead, proxy populations have been used, including the Yoruba people of Western Africa, to represent most African American ancestry. So even if an individual's ancestors did hail from somewhere in West Africa, if their particular lineage as captured in their sample does not match up with reference sequences, some tests will turn up with no family ties. The variety of testing methods based on mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosome markers, and autosomal DNA variants and analysis can produce results with vastly different interpretations. Scans for haploid genetic markers can indicate a common paternal ancestor, but they reflect only a fraction of any person's total genetic ancestry, the authors noted. And even autosomal marker scans, which represent a much greater proportion of genome history, still miss large portions of ancestral code because as ancestors become more distant, fewer of their genetic indicators remain, decreasing the odds that they will be found in a DNA test, Royal and colleagues reported. So as generations come and go and they marry different people, you may have been related to Abraham, but your DNA may not show that because over the years it has evolved through marriage and external influences, right? There are things such as viruses that can also alter DNA, by the way. With all of these big unknowns, even with the best statistics, rarely can definitive conclusions about ancestry be made beyond the assessment of whether putative close relatives are or are not related, such as in a paternity test. So any link to specific historical figures uncovered by genetic ancestry testing, whether it is Queen Elizabeth I or Genghis Khan, is merely speculative. So if you think you're a Hebrew Israelite and you think your DNA ties back to Abraham or Jacob, they just said it's speculative. Yeah, you can find out which kid belongs to you, but the further back you go, the more difficult it becomes. Margin of error and statistical uncertainty are expected and usually accounted for in assessing results in an academic setting. But for results on an individual ancestry test, interpretation often is key. The report authors noted because the information that is presented might have direct psychosocial and other implications for the individual and even political decisions such as claiming right to heritage or even citizenship are increasingly based on genetic ancestry findings. But legal precedents have yet to be consistent in interpreting these results. The task force called for greater standardization in analysis methods, but also in reporting, so that ancestry results would be delivered and perhaps interpreted with the proper amount of essential uncertainty. As sales of genetic tests for health and medical profiles in brick-and-mortar stores remain in limbo pending review by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, both those tests and genetic ancestry tests remain available for the public to purchase online. So the video we released about 2 weeks ago on Haplogroup was a re-release. Now, when we first released that video, there was a brother who was debating us, and it turns out that he took his test with 3 different companies, and 3 different times he had 3 different haplogroup results, Y-DNA haplogroup results. I remember one specific result, he was actually an A. Another one, he was E. I don't remember what the third one was, but he has a video on YouTube where he shows this. I just don't know where it's at anymore because it's been a few years. Okay, but let me show you something else. So in his case, why different haplogroup results? Why would the haplogroups results be different, right? Depending on the company that you use. Isn't it a scientific certainty or not? Why do vendors give me different haplogroups? This question often comes up when people test with different vendors and receive different haplogroup results for both Y and mitochondrial DNA. If you need a quick refresher on who carries which type of DNA, read 4 Kinds of DNA for Genetic Genealogy. You're the same person, right? So why would you receive different answers from different testing companies? And which answers actually right? The answer is pretty straightforward. Conceptually, having to do with how vendors test and interpret your DNA. It's up to man to make the decision and determine how to interpret your DNA. Some of you guys that think you E1B1A, another company's going to say, nope, not true. Different companies test different pieces of your DNA depending on the type of chip the company is using for testing. So that's a major issue right there, is how this chip is programmed. So the way they have programmed the chip, the version of the reference tree they are using to assign haplogroups, the level they have decided to report. So they may not even go deep into your DNA, take a high level reading and label you E1B1A when if they went deeper you were G or something else. You understand? It's flawed right here just with the chips. It's also flawed with the version of the data that's being used at the time. So for the intelligent Hebrew Israelites, you guys understand that this is moot. This is a waste of time. Okay? As my brother and I said, we verified it autosomal. Autosomal is how you identify who you are related to. Therefore, their haplogroups reported may vary, and some may be more exact than others. Occasionally, a vendor outside the major testers is simply wrong. Not all tests are created equal. All haplogroups carry interesting information and can be at least somewhat genealogically useful. For example, haplogroups alone can tell you if your direct line DNA, paternal or maternal, is probably European. That's not true, right? Because if you look at some of the other studies, it tells you that those ancient ancestors from thousands and tens of thousands of years ago originated in Africa. Actually, that's the going theory. Okay, so a basic haplogroup can rule out a genealogical match through a specific branch. Okay, but can't confirm a genealogical match. You need to compare specific DNA locations not provided with haplogroup testing alone for genealogical matching. Plus, you'll need to add genealogical records where possible. So you need more data, he's saying, right, in order to bring it together. So basically, you're going to have to move to autosomal to get any valuable information. But as they said, there's many reasons why your haplogroup will be wrong. But I'm about to show you some more reasons why this science is not conclusive. So this is from Wikipedia, haplogroup EM96. So I'm going to scroll down a bit under origins, and I'm going to start here. Okay, so Underhill is a genetic scientist. Underhill proposed that haplogroup E may have arisen in East Africa. Now, what I want to show you is the language used. Okay, and specifically here, may. May means might, possibly, right? So it's not definitive, as we said earlier. So let's continue. Some authors, as Chandrasekhar, accept the earlier position of Hammer, that haplogroup E may have originated in Asia, given that E is a clade of haplogroup DE, with the other major clade, haplogroup D, being exclusively distributed in Asia. DE is a clade within M168, with the other two major clades, C and F, considered to have a Eurasian origin. Okay, so this guy's opinion differs from Underhill. Okay, and Chandrasekhar is saying he thinks it's from Asia. So right there you see it's not conclusive. You got two guys with two opinions. Okay, how valuable is this so far? Okay, let's continue. However, several discoveries made since the Hammer articles are thought to make an Asian origin less likely. Underhill and Kivilides demonstrated that C and F have a common ancestor, meaning that DE has only one sibling, which is non-African. DE is found in both Asia and Africa, meaning that not only one, but several siblings of D are found in Asia and Africa. Carafet, in which Hammer is a co-author, significantly rearranged time estimates, leading to new interpretations on the geographical origin, of ancient subclades. So they're guessing about the origin of these ancient subclades because they don't have the original DNA from the ancient ancestors. So they guess. Amongst other things, this article proposed a much older age for haplogroup EM96 than had been considered previously, giving it a similar age to haplogroup D and DE itself, meaning that there is no longer any strong reason to see it as an offshoot of DE, which must have happened long after DE came into existence and had entered Asia. If you listen to the language, it's a guess, it's a theory. Okay, So I'm going to read something else for you as well. But I also want, before I continue, I want to read this as well here, right? The Eurasian Center of Origin and Dispersal for haplogroup E has also been hypothesized based on the similar age of the clade's parent haplogroup DE. You know what a hypothesis is? It's a guess. It's an educated guess. It's a theory. That's what hypothesize means, okay? Most of you guys will know that. All right, so once again, we have language that tells you this is a guessing game. Okay, so this is another Wikipedia article about the haplogroup DE, and we're on the section on distribution, and I want you to continue to pay attention to the language. The subclades of DE continue to confound investigators trying to reconstruct the migration of humans, because while they are common in Africa and East Asia, they are also largely absent between these two regions. As the paragroup DE, including DE, is extremely rare, the majority of DE male lines fall into subclades of either DM174, the most widespread branch of haplogroup D, or EM96, while DM174 likely originated in Asia. The only place where it is now found, EM96, is more likely to have originated in East Africa. Okay, likely, more likely. You understand this is not definitive. It is educated guess, a hypothesis, a theory. However, a West Asian origin for EM96 is considered possible by some scholars. Listen to that language. Is what? Considered possible, which means it's not definitive. It could be by some scholars. Some scholars say it could be. Others obviously say it's not. Okay, so if you listen to the language, you understand now that the theory and the concept of haplogroup is it is a educated guess. It's a guessing game. Okay, if you just understand the language that you're seeing right here for yourself. So this is at genetics.org, and the article is a rare deep rooting D0 African Y chromosomal haplogroup and its implications for the expansion of modern humans out of Africa. So if you don't know, the leading theory among these geneticists is that all of these major haplogroups originated in Africa tens of thousands of years ago. Okay, it's a Darwinian concept, not a biblical one. And tens of thousands of years ago, all of these haplogroups, R, G, E, D, F, came out of Africa. Okay, so these camp teachings about E1, B1A, and other groups are European. All of those DNAs originated tens of thousands of years ago, and your super ancient ancestor migrated into those areas. So if they all originated in Africa, what does that mean? They were all black. Okay, so even these genes white folks have that may be common today come from Africa. But let me just show you one more thing on this page, and basically it's once again to look at the language that's being used when they teach haplogroup. Okay, so this is maybe a 3/4 of the way down in this article. Okay, mitochondrial DNA sequences also provide a robust phylogeny, which demonstrates that non-African mitochondrial DNAs descend from a single African branch with rapid diversification outside Africa. So it originated with one African DNA, and as they migrated, all of those other people that migrated, there was rapid changes in the DNA once outside Africa. And once again, this is a theory. Okay. Into the M and N lineages, and many subsequent branches. Ingman et al. 2000, Devise in 2019. So as current as 2019, that's their thinking. Dating using ancient mitochondrial DNA suggests a separation of non-African from African lineages after 62,000 to 65,000 years ago. Okay, we know according to the Bible, mankind hasn't been around that long, so there you go. That's one reason to trash this stuff. But anyway, while an analysis of present-day mitochondrial DNA suggested divergence outside Africa 57 to 65,000 years ago, these estimates are based on less than 1% of the sequence length used from the Y chromosome, but are nonetheless very consistent. So these studies are based on less than 1% of the Y chromosome. Less than 1%. Okay. This discussion has thus far, assumed, so an assumption, right? Pay attention to the language. Assume that present-day distributions of Y haplogroups are relevant to events 50,000 to 100,000 years ago, and thus that Y phylogeography carries information about the major migration out of Africa. Ancient population structure within Africa that separated C, D, and FT from other Y haplogroups beginning after 76,000 years ago, with migration out only 50 to 59,000 years ago, would also fit the evidence presented above. It said would, not does. Present-day Y chromosomal structure in Africa has been massively shaped by events in the last 10,000 years, including the Bantu speaker expansion, right? This is the Hebrew Israelite expansion. They call it the Bantu expansion in Central and Southern Africa, and entry of Eurasian lineages, so the colonization, into Northern and Central Africa, and is thus a poor guide to structure before 10,000 years ago. So because of the Bantu migration and the European invasion, it makes it difficult to use any of this data to compare to the people who existed tens of thousands of years ago. That's what he just said. Despite this, it is striking that Western Central Africa is the location of the deepest rooting A00 lineage in Cameroon. How you like that? There's someone in Cameroon with A00. A major location of the A0 lineage in Cameroon, the Gambia and Ghana, and the D0 lineage in Nigeria and Guinea-Bissau. This retention of the deepest Y chromosomal diversity in Western Central Africa contrasts with the autosomal genetic structure where the deepest roots have been reported in Southern African hunter-gatherers. Perhaps, understand the language, perhaps, which is maybe, theory, right? Perhaps supporting the hypothesis. What is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is an educated guess. Once again, you're wasting your time with this haplogroup stuff, right? Perhaps supporting the hypothesis of deep population structure. Analysis of ancient African DNA from 50,000 to 100,000 years ago would provide considerably more information on Y haplogroup distributions at this time, but is not currently available. In the meantime, further focus on present-day Y chromosomal lineages in Central and Western Africa to understand more about the deep African lineages seems warranted. So more research is warranted. And this current study illustrates the broad insights that can sometimes be revealed by very rare lineages. In conclusion, sequencing of the D0Y chromosomes and placement of them on a calibrated Y chromosomal phylogeny identify the most likely, okay, not definitive, most likely, right? So in a percentage of 1 to 10, it's highly likely, but not guaranteed. Most likely a model of Y chromosomal exit from Africa. So it's likely that These DNAs exited from Africa. An origin of the DE lineage inside Africa and expansion out of the CD and FT lineages. So if you read these other articles out there, they basically say out of DE came out of Africa. CD, F, and T came from DE, and they are found in other nations, including Europe and Middle East and things like that. It suggests an exit time interval it suggests an exit time interval that overlaps with the time of Neanderthal admixture estimated from autosomal analysis and slightly refines it. These findings are consistent with a shared history of Y chromosome and autosomes and illustrate how study of Y lineages may lead to general new insight. So they're still looking for insight. They're still trying to get understanding because it's a guessing game. Peace and blessing, Israel. Your captivity is ending. And if you like what we do, please support us at patreon.com/TEOTW.